And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
Good evening. Welcome to The Money Show. I'm Stephen Grootes, 9 minutes after 6 tonight. Plenty to come in the next little while. I don't know about you, but if you look at where you were 10, 15 years ago and how much money you thought you would have, do you have what you thought you would have? Now, look, if you didn't buy property in Cape Town 15 years ago, I'm fairly certain the answer is no. And there is a lot more evidence showing that actually, if you're in what is sort of called, and this is a very general and complicated definition, if you're in what's called the South African middle class, plenty of evidence that you actually have less money in your pocket than you did, say, 10 years ago. We'll focus on that, a sort of special edition, if you like, on The Money Show this evening. There's a lot to look at there. I would be very interested to hear from you, your experience, though, please. I know you have one. I know you're feeling in a particular way. I may have it completely wrong, and you may be thinking that actually you're quite optimistic for the future. My own personal concern, and I say this as a parent, is how worried I am about younger people. Seems to be much tougher for them almost than it is, and it looks like, it feels like it's going to be tougher for them than really for my generation. That's certainly how I feel. So I'd really like to hear from you on this tonight on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. You may prefer the safety, maybe the anonymity as well, of a voice note on 072 702 1702. Also to come tonight, looking at the situation around steel imports and tariffs. We'll speak to the chair, or the commissioner, I should say, of the Independent Trade Administration Commission, Ayabonga Cawe. They've published new tariffs on steel to protect our steel industry. And also this evening, a strange story. Patricia de Lille, the Minister of Tourism, also leader of the Good Party, deciding, it seems almost out of nowhere, but it's clearly not out of nowhere, to basically dissolve, fire is probably a more accurate word, the board of SA Tourism. Some people I've spoken to for many years on that board, and most of them have very good track records. I'm thinking of people like Lawson Naidu, for example. It seems at issue of findings by the Auditor General against the CEO. The board had suspended the CEO. We've seen this movie before, many, many times. I'm hoping that there's something different going on here, but we'll find out more about it. So good to hear from you this evening. Also, don't forget, really looking forward to the conversation with France Belleni this evening from 7:30. And my daughter has come across a thing called Duolingo. Have you? Anyone in your family? Maybe. It's supposed to teach you a new language. Graham Codrington has the most amazing story about Duolingo and its valuation, that to come in about an hour from now. Really good to hear from you this evening and your experience of being in the South African middle classes.
The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, we focus tonight on what can really look like the decline of the middle class and the amount of money you actually have to spend on things outside bills and food. Yesterday, Moneyware published what I thought was a compelling piece on the subject. Today, the BankServe Africa Take-Home Pay Index showing just how much pressure you're under. We start tonight with Elise Kruger, an independent economist who looks at that BankServe data. Elise, good evening. What do the latest numbers tell us about the amount of money that people actually have to spend every month?
Good evening, Stephen. Yes, the Bank of Africa Take-Home Pay basically, is an average of all the salaries paid into bank accounts, cleared through Banks of Africa. So it is a snapshot of the status, I would say, of salary earners. And then we track that over time to get a feel for the trend in the employment market, trends in salary increases and so on. And what we really saw in this July number is a further tick down, and it was actually the first consecutive month of moderation in this take-home pay, which is starting to become a bit of a concerning trend, though it is off a fairly high base in the sense that we have moved lower since Feb, and we had quite a peak in Feb. So the average for the first 7 months of the year is still quite notably above a year ago.
You look at what people are being paid. There's also what people have to pay out. So, for example, last month we saw quite a big increase in tariffs from municipalities, for example. Yes, people are taking home money, but they have to pay out more as well. And I think the feeling is that you get a bit squeezed in the process.
Absolutely, especially, in the month of July, I think, the focus is very much on that, municipal account where we get all these annual increases that are way above, average inflation in South Africa and also above your salary increase. So this is really a month where that squeeze, I think, is really, in stark sort of focus. However, if you look at it over the total basket of the CPI, then, the picture is slightly more positive in the sense that average inflation is running at about, say, 3.5% for the year as a whole. Incidentally, also today's number, but say average for 2025 at 3.5%, and if you think about the salary increase around 5%, then you're looking at a real salary increase again in 2025, which, theoretically should preserve purchasing power for salary earners somewhat.
Elise Kruger, thanks very much indeed. Independent economist. Benay Sagar is the executive head at Debt Busters. Benay, good evening. You would think with interest rates coming down, with inflation being lower, the pressure would be easing a little. What are you finding?
Thanks, Stephen, for having me on the show. I think similar to what was said before, there's definitely relief from interest rate reduction, and we've seen a huge number of people tap into what's affectionately known as a two-pot retirement system. But I think where the pressure is, particularly from a lending perspective, is the average incomes haven't really grown over the last, let's call it 9 to 10 years, since 2015 or so. Yet we see things that are mandated, like, in terms of pricing, regulatory-wise, like electricity rates and all of that, have gone up, 65%, for example, electricity over the same period, petrol price 75%. And what we find is that these two things put together, the lack of growth in incomes plus the increases that we can't do much about because it's coming from public sector, really force people to borrow more. And what we're finding is that average debt levels for today's consumer compared to 2016 is 33% more. Now, the CPI impact over that period, over the 9-year period is more than 50%. So you can say it's less than the inflation, but I think where the real pain point is those higher earners, we've highlighted on the show before, average debt levels about 80% higher than they were a few years ago. And I think that's where the real pain is coming from. These are expensive loans with high interest rates, and I think people are really struggling to repay them.
I mean, you can talk inflation, you can talk interest rates, you can talk all of that. If the level of debt is going up, people are under pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, maybe 10 years ago, if we had spoken on the show, which we didn't, but had we spoken on the show 10 years ago, we would have talked about, maybe luxury spending, people overstretching themselves. I think today, there isn't much more room to cut. If you look at some of the income bands we track very closely, particularly on the lower end, people are having to spend somewhere between 20 to 25% of what remains after debt repayments towards things like rates and transport. And these are not really things where there's a lot of flexibility. We know about the problems of the trains over the last several years. Alternative means of transport have become really expensive, people. We know about the rates and electricity. Not much one can do about that. I think that's where we're really seeing the difficulty hit the consumers.
Benay Sagar, thanks very much indeed. Benay Sagar is the executive head of Debt Busters. You with the Money Show, 18 minutes after 6. A focus tonight on the declining buying power of the South African middle class. I know you'll have a view and an experience. 011-883-0702 and 021-446-0567. Kevin Lings is the chief economist at Stanlib. Kevin, good evening. Is it possible to sort of pinpoint maybe where the squeeze sort of started, where the dynamic turned and average incomes just stopped going up?
Evening, Stephen. You can actually in South Africa. You can go back to about 2010, 2011. That's when it started to go in the wrong direction, and it's been pretty much continuous since then. And what you said in the introduction is 100% correct. The ability to afford goods and services has declined, even if you've got a job. And there are a couple of factors that go into that, one of which obviously is the inflation dynamic. What's been described is the difference between experienced inflation versus measured inflation. So if you look at the inflation basket, it's got many categories in it. But in truth, many of those items you very seldom spend money on, right? So if you look at the inflation rate for appliances, it's not like you go out and buy an appliance every day, and that current inflation rate is minus 3.6%. So that's incredibly low, and it goes into the calculation, and it helps to dampen down the measured inflation. But if you looked at electricity prices, which you do spend money on all the time, or if you looked at food prices, you spend money all the time, or you looked at transport costs, those prices are well in excess of that. And so, yes, the overall inflation rate, when you see it from stats, say it looks like it's under control. But what you experience, what you engage in with every day, and in South Africa, it's mostly food, transport, electricity, paying for waters, etc. Those numbers are significantly higher. And so when you look at your money after you've paid for those items, you have very little left. And obviously you want to still participate in the economy. And so many people then indulge in credit card debt, store credit in order to do that. And that's natural, that's obvious, but that credit becomes quite expensive. And so it eats into your ability to kind of manage your monthly expenses. But Stephen, I would say that that's not the main problem. The main problem is a lack of prospect, a lack of progression in your career, in your employment. So let me just describe that. So if you go to other countries, right, and you look at how do they cope? How do they cope with exactly the same pressures? What happens is there are many more job opportunities. So as you gain experience in your business or your company you're working for, you are looking to move up the corporate ladder. You're looking to prosper. You're looking for a better paying job. And those jobs are available. And so you find yourself moving to another business, a much better paying job. And in many instances, that can increase your salary in one go by 20%, 30%, because you've got this nice uplift as you change jobs. And when we look at, I was looking at the US, that is a massive component of how they accumulate income, is by changing jobs and getting a better paid job. And as you progress in your career, so you get towards the end of the career, you're earning significantly more than where you started. In South Africa, we don't have those opportunities. We're not investing, we're not growing, we're not employing, we're not expanding. There are very few opportunities. And so the ability for somebody to progress in terms of their salary, to get a promotion within their own business, or to move to another company for a much better paying job, that's incredibly limited in this country because you don't have economic growth. And then that stifles everything. And so these price pressures then compound. If you think about your own career, I mean, your prosperity has increased significantly over time because you've been able to move into different job opportunities, and those have given you an uplift in terms of your income. But if you don't have that prospect, if you don't have that option, you're still doing more or less the same job 20 years later, then your ability to progress is very limited, and the blame for that is the lack of economic growth, the lack of investment in South Africa.
Kevin Lings, you've put that so well. Thank you very much indeed. The chief economist at Stanlib, a very clear explanation of what's happening. Well, Jacolize Meiring is the senior researcher and head of the Personal Finance Research Division at the Bureau of Market Research. Jacolize, good evening. You've looked at the amount of money each generation gets. What differences do you see between the generations?
Yes, good evening, Stephen. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, the Bureau of Market Research, in our latest reports on personal income estimates for South Africa that we do on an annual basis, we've actually this year put a flavor of generations on it. We specifically looked at the disaggregates on income patterns across 4 generational groups for our adult population. So specifically on Generation Z, then so that's our younger generation, age between 15 and 27 years. This was now as for last year. And then moving up to our born-free millennials, Generation X, and then our older adults, our silent generations, etc. So with Generation Z, what we could see from that is that from the adult population, so that's individuals aged 15 years and above in South Africa, They account for about 30% of the adult population, but earn only 7.4% of cash flow income. I'm quickly interrupting myself here. Cash flow income is our definition, is what actually goes into consumers' pockets based on our income expenditure model that we have at the Bureau of Market Research. So this income for the Generation Z, we could basically see that, remember, there's a high level of youth unemployment that is persistent in South Africa. Only 19.9% is estimated of that Generation Z to be employed, actually. And then while a large majority of Generation Zs are still remaining in education, obviously. But those that have completed a tertiary level education, so 7.2%, that's our estimate, already have a tertiary education, but they are responsible for 29% of that generation's income earning. So that we can definitely see that translation. And then if we go to our born-free millennials, with that, we actually see that there's that strict the correlation almost between they make up about 36% of income in South Africa, and they're also about 36% of the population. But the reality is that 40% of our millennials, so those are individuals between the age of 28 and 43, are in the very low income group.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jacolize, and you make the point in your research that, and this is common in many countries, the older you are, the sort of richer you are. You would expect that. But if you look at what Kevin Lings said just a moment ago, that your chances of actually progressing in an economy that doesn't grow are very low. My concern would be that the younger generation, so the generation after me, the generations after me, are not going to be able to catch up to where I am now. And if you look at what Kevin Lings said, that seems very likely.
Definitely, because our younger generations they're not receiving the opportunities to actually benefit from a stable career because there are no job opportunities that are available. They can't benefit from the growth in investments that we've seen over the last 4 years. And that was a big distinction that we could see in the general trends. Those individuals that were able to be exposed to investments through either the growth in your value of your portfolio in pensions and annuities or otherwise investments, those are the individuals that could move up the income in their income groups, where our lower generations, unfortunately, we're sitting with even our Generation X. We have a lot of our Generation X individuals that are sitting in that pressure of supporting parents and children. So, and if we look at our top older generations, there's only a very, very small portion of our older adults that has actually 1.9%. This is actually a very, very bad statistics, but 1.9% of our older adults account for 53% of our older generation's income. The rest are all dependent on grants. So there's some real intervention that's needed so that we don't lose our generations. That there's not that if we don't improve employment opportunities for our younger cohorts and income growth doesn't become more inclusive, we're going to see inequality just deepening further, and we're going to possibly lose a generation that could be excluded from growth.
Jacolize Meiring, thanks very much indeed. Incredibly sobering. Senior researcher and head of the Personal Finance Research Division at the Bureau of Market Research. Well, I don't know about you, but I found that a very sobering conversation. Your experiences, your suggestions to improve it, please, on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Chris Stewart is a portfolio manager at 91. After that, Chris, we need some cheering up. I don't know if there's much around to do that, but DRD Gold did very nicely.
Yeah, good evening, Stephen. As you point out, that is an extremely sobering, commentary on exactly what's going on in the economy today. And I think we're seeing it in terms of some of the results of listed corporates that we're seeing as well. Fortunately, not in the case of DRD, because DRD has been a spectacular beneficiary over the last 12 months of a buoyant dollar and indeed a buoyant rand gold price. And that's really reflected despite the fact that production volumes were down a little bit, all-in sustaining costs were up a little bit. The overriding benefit to the top line has really outweighed everything else, and that's been a very strong gold price. And as a result of that, we've seen a big increase in earnings, a big increase in free cash flows, a big increase in dividends, and a reasonably warm reception from the market today, despite the fact that they have provided some fairly modest commentary on the near-term production prospects. They're going to be continuing to invest in the business, but possibly securing a longer-term growth outlook for gold production, which I think will be well received.
Investec starting their share buyback, 2.5 billion rand, did push their share price up nicely today.
Yeah, I mean, Investec has been on a path since basically when they unbundled Investec Asset Management back in March of 2020. They've been on a path of capital optimization across the group, increasing their returns. They've increased their return on equity quite spectacularly over the period, and then recently have put out some new targets for more ambitious returns still. And part of that is going to be further capital optimization. They completed a share buyback last year of about 7 billion rand. They've indicated that they are kicking off another share buyback of about 2.5 billion rand. That's probably about 21 days trade at a third of the market across the various exchanges where Investec are listed. That should support long-term earnings growth prospects on a per share basis. It should support long-term return on equity, and all of that is reflected on a better rating of the stock, and we saw a little bit of that today.
And then the Nasdaq down for a second day in a row. There doesn't seem to be any specific reason for it. I know a little bit of quite carefully whispered commentary, if I can call it that, about maybe some concerns about value for money in AI.
Yeah, there's a few things. I think you've got the you've got Jerome Powell speaking at Jackson Hole on Friday. I think the market's a little bit nervous that he's going to throw cold water on the rate cutting prospects, despite the pressure that he's getting from Donald Trump. That the market had been even starting to discount a 50 basis point rate cut at the next meeting, which I think will probably be removed from the table on Friday. So, less by way of rate cuts is not great for highly rated stocks, and the Nasdaq, as we know, contains a lot of the highly rated growth stocks out there. So I think there's a little bit of nervous rotation going on in advance of Friday's speech. But in addition to that, as you say, these companies are spending tens of billions of dollars every quarter on AI, investing in AI, and thus far, and it may be very, very early and way too early to tell, but thus far the revenue payoff for the massive amounts of capital being invested is not necessarily evident. And perhaps there's an element of nervousness around that particular theme as well.
Chris Stewart, really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Portfolio manager at 91.
WhatsApp Stephen
On 072
702
1702.
Well, a few very interesting WhatsApp voice notes coming through about how your experience of money at the moment, how much you have compared to how much you sort of thought you would have. Richard saying declining disposable income is a real issue. It has huge ramifications for savings. My response has been to make a plan with targets and actions and key steps, and to change jobs and managing my own provident fund by getting funds away from big companies who manage them badly and rob us of the fees. Anonymous says, I'm in middle management. I earn 800,000 rand. I presume that's a year. I can't afford to spend 5,000 rand on electricity. I've got no loans. I can't afford a new car. I struggle at the end of the month with SARS, VAT, rates. We're working for the government. Do you know, I think there is that feeling, particularly municipalities at the moment. And the problem with municipalities is they're also desperate for money, that's only going to get worse. Voice notes coming through as well this evening.
Good evening, Stephen. Thanks for a great show so far. I, myself and my wife are both together. We still fall under the middle class with our incomes. And I think one of the major contributing factors as well, apart from general salary increases not being in line with inflation, is also due to the non-adjustment of tax brackets. So a lot of the time you might have on paper a good salary, from a gross perspective, but the moment all those deductions come, you're sitting in a very different ball game, especially like most employers now force you to have some form of medical cover, even if it's just a basic hospital plan. a lot of larger organizations have group cover and all those things as well.
Nah, dude, this economy is so bad. Because now, it's not like I went into a profession that was like, bad. Like, I decided to do actuarial science. This is my first year of work. I have most of my exemptions. And yet I feel like my wallet is being squeezed at every opportunity it can. Hey, I just bought groceries now and I feel like, how am I going to make it to the end of next month? Not even the end of this month, the end of next month. Because there's still petrol, car insurance, and a whole bunch of other things that I'm paying for. And on top of that, you're still expected to somehow save money, which is the hardest part. Because if you get into the habit, okay, it's cool. But half the time, there's other things going on where it's like, okay, I can only save so much.
Such a good point, hey? And in the end, what gets cut out is the saving, because everything else is like survival. I was really struck by, I was struck by all the points our speakers made earlier. But what Kevin Lings said in particular about not being able to move from job to job to job. I've noticed that sometimes. You can see people have been doing the same job or they're in the same company for a very long time. Now, lots of positives from that. But in terms of their earnings growth, that's a real issue. Your thoughts, please, and your experiences on 011 8830 702 and 021 446 0567.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
12 minutes to 7. Good to hear from you tonight. The International Trade Administration Commission now releasing what it calls a preliminary set of tariffs for steel products as they're imported into the country. Itac's currently conducting an investigation into what tariffs or measures would provide support for our steel industry, which is under intense pressure at the moment. The Chief Commissioner at Itac is Ayabonga Cawe. Chief Commissioner, good evening. You're implementing tariffs, as I understand it, of 10% on some steel products, 15% on others, some rebates as well. How have you come to these preliminary decisions?
Good evening to you, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners. And thank you so much once again for the opportunity. Well, this is a preliminary set of findings of a review we had undertaken from around March or so, when we had gazetted the initiation of this thoroughgoing review in the Government Gazette. And really what stage we are in now is a preliminary determination, and we're soliciting comment from the public regarding some of the issues that you've raised. The one element of the proposal is in Chapter 72 and 73 of the tariff book, where there is still some policy space to raise tariffs, to try and get a sense as to whether we should do that or not. And based on our investigation and the verifications undertaken of the domestic industry, and analysis of some of the trade data, the Commission is making a preliminary determination that the rate of duty be raised to their respective bound rates. Now, the listener might be asking, what is a bound rate? And a bound rate is really the ceiling tariff rate as a percentage of the value of any consignment that would come into the country of an import tax as per the negotiated tariff concessions that South Africa signed on to with the World Trade Organization in the mid-1990s. And so you would have seen in that gazette, that first table listing a wide array of products and a preliminary determination being made by the Commission that those products, recommending, of course, to the Minister, that those products be raised from 0% of the duty right through to 10%. There are also products there, much like tubes and piping and other welded products of non-alloy steel, in Chapter 73, which are already at a 10% duty, where the bound rate or the ceiling duty is at around 15%. And that is kind of one part of the proposal, of a few proposals that are being made in this determination.
Okay, so if these tariffs were imposed and were imposed for a long time, what impact do you think this would have on our steel industry? Would it provide enough support for our steel industry without raising the price of imported steel too much?
Well, is that not the balance that we always have to strike?
Sure.
And I think the question of enough support, I think is how long is a piece of string? I think tariffs in and of themselves are a blunt instrument if they are not complemented by other enabling and supportive measures. that respond to the particularities of the crisis confronting the steel sector in South Africa. And that crisis, Stephen, as it has unfolded over the last 2 decades, has many characteristic features. One of those is that you've got very low demand domestically. You also have an installed capital kit much higher by way of the ability to supply than what in any one year would demand. Second to that, you've also seen a massive reduction in export sales on the part of the integrated steel producer. In 2004, export sales constituted nearly 2/5 of the revenue of the then ISCO prior to it being acquired by ArcelorMittal. That figure now is at around less than a tenth in some years. And so you've had this situation of not just a narrowing of demand and also a narrowing of domestic and export demand. You've also had, whatever small demand you might have, a greater share of that being occupied and taken up by imports, which now constitute around, depending on what assumptions you make, around a third of the consumption of steel in the South African economy. And so a tariff might assist with some of those things, but not all of them. And I think really what we're looking at here is to say, in a context of unprecedented, chronic rather than episodic overcapacity, how then do we respond, not on a case-by-case product, tariff heading by tariff heading, but in a very kind of coordinated and synchronous fashion that looks at the entire value chain.
Ayabonga Cawe, thank you very much indeed. Chief Commissioner at the International Trade Administration Commission. Really do appreciate the time tonight.
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by ABSA CIB, backing the Ideas Fund by advancing capital to African infrastructure investment managers.
Confirmation today that Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille dissolving the board of SA Tourism after the board decided to suspend its CEO, Nombulelo Guliwe. In her statement today, de Lille says she's disbanding the board because it called a meeting outside of normal procedures, but the Auditor General made findings against Guliwe, which led to the board's decision to fire her, or suspend her, I should say. Wayne Duvenage is the CEO of the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Wayne, good evening. Which way are you going on this one? Is it possible to know what's really going on here? It does seem to be quite an extreme act by the minister.
It is extremely extreme, Stephen. Yeah, our view is that the minister should retract this decision, or the president should fire her. It's that simple. Wow. I'll tell you why. Yeah, look, we seldom see enough boards in the state, on these state entities, that have a good mixture of representation, leadership, not filled with politicians or politically connected people. And this SA Tourism Board has got an array of leaders in the tourism industry, and an excellent board, good governance. And what they've done is acted on an Auditor General's report and a forensic report which corroborated the Auditor General's report that there is gross misconduct, financial misconduct by the CEO. And they haven't fired her. They want a disciplinary hearing to take place and let the course run. They've got these reports 3 months ago, so they have to start acting, because in labor law, you can't just keep these things in limbo. The chairperson has resigned. I think he was under pressure from the board that something has to happen, and he's ducked. And they're not out of line. They're not acting unlawfully. They are correct. They have a unanimous decision that they want a corrective action to take place. And all they've done is what is legally they're empowered to do. And the minister, instead of engaging with the board, really engaging them to find out where is this going, what's happened, she's protecting the CEO, the outgoing CEO. And it just doesn't make sense, Stephen. It really is. This is political interference on steroids.
I mean, Patricia de Lille, I'm sure, will be very angry at the claim that she would be providing or protecting corruption. But we've seen this kind of happen in the past, unfortunately. I mean, that doesn't mean that's what's happening now. But we've seen a situation where a minister fires a board fights back. And in this case, it's the Auditor General finding against the CEO that has real power here.
Yeah, Absolutely. I think the board's case is strong. We've seen it in the past on the Prasa board with Popo Molefe, when Depur Peters fired them for no proper reason. They were doing their job, and the courts reinstated that board. And I think that's what's going to happen here. And Patricia de Lille's going to get egg on her face. What she should have done is taken a little bit more time, engaged with the board. Imagine not engaging with the board meaningfully to find out and get to the bottom of this. Just sending them a mail last week to say, tell me why I shouldn't dismiss you, and then dismissing them after they've responded to and given all the good, valid answers. So we've done some research. We've engaged with industry leaders on this. We've looked at the matter. We need to celebrate strong boards that stand up against, and we're not saying the past CEO or the CEO is corrupt. We're saying that there's mismanagement of finances and it needs to be investigated, and that's what they want to do, and put her through a disciplinary hearing because she has transgressed her roles. And the minister just seems to be hell-bent on taking the board on instead of, these are the people she appointed, by the way. She didn't inherit them. She appointed them. And she's just rushed into this. It just doesn't make sense to us, and I think she's out of line. And as I said, political interference.
Wayne Duvenage, thanks very much indeed, the CEO of the organization Undoing Tax Abuse. Well, you might be yourself somehow directly involved in the tourism industry. You might have a strong view one way or another about the minister's action here, and Patricia de Lille, at some point a very popular politician, obviously, gone through a couple of parties and been involved in many things, but is in cabinet, is the Minister of Tourism, is the leader of the Good Party, and strangely, we have this decision which seems to almost have come out of nowhere. I suspect, my own personal experience of the Minister Patricia de Lille, I suspect that we can expect her to mount a bit of a fight back in response to these claims in the next day or so, if not tomorrow, maybe the day after. But your view on 011-883-0702 and 021-446-0567. Wendy Nola, your consumer ninja, and a very strange SMS in the next little while. Graham Codrington's looking at the Duolingo app and its valuation. And don't forget your special shapeshifter this evening, France Belleni. You're with The Money Show. It's 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, backing the Ideas Fund by advancing capital to African infrastructure investment managers. Good evening. Plenty to come in the next little while. We'll be talking to Graham Codrington in just a moment about Duolingo. There's an astonishing story about its valuation. It's a language app supposed to help you to learn a language. Wendy Nola has a story around SMSs and ABSA, and France Belleni is your shapeshifter this evening. A really interesting career from the union movement, I suppose you would say, to the boardroom. I don't know if you'll mind me putting it like that. Also good to hear from you tonight on 011-883-0702 and 021-443-446. Listen to me, 021-446-0567.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
A couple of messages coming through around the declining power of your rand, and we've been talking about the disposable income for the middle classes at the moment. And Clement saying, my view on the declining income, there's a weaker economy. Spending over Christmas and Easter holidays has been going down since at least 2017. The weakened split in organized labor, so a split in COSATU. I remember watching that happen so closely. A greedy company owners and directors, and incentives paid to directors. I do wonder sometimes if there's a short-termism among some of the decisions that are made. You really get that sense. And then the excuse to blame COVID to retrench workers while directors receive salaries, and then not everything was affected by the lockdown. Some people actually quadrupled their budgets. Clement, thank you for that. Some very thoughtful points. I mean, I was saying to someone today, I just get a sense sometimes that people say, well, things changed, COVID came, and they never recovered afterwards. But it's not COVID, actually. The trends were there before. What we remember are the boom times before COVID. We don't remember 2017, 2018, 2019. We're remembering, 2013 maybe, or the World Cup or something. And that's one of the differences. I think that's what makes this such an interesting discussion. Anyway, I don't know, your views on it, very interesting. And Patricia de Lille, as I say, I've known her as a fighter. She is someone who likes to wear boxing gloves. I wouldn't be surprised if she comes out fighting a little bit. One good thing that's come out of today's inflation numbers, by the way, and And yes, the headline is that inflation's at 3.5%, beef prices largely to blame, so the foot and mouth outbreak. But coffee, finally, coffee inflation is coming down. It was 17% a month, by the way, for a very long time. So it's finally beginning to come down. And I'll tell you this for free, in my experience. People can say, there's journalism, do radio stations, do newsrooms. What do they run on? Electricity? Nah. Food? Not a chance. Coffee? Yes. They run on coffee. I'm fairly certain it's the same for you.
The Money Show.
Business Unusual.
Well, I suspect he runs on coffee. I'm not really sure. Graham Codrington is the futurist and partner at Tomorrow Today. Graham, good evening. We're talking about Duolingo this evening. My daughter has used it sometimes. It's a language app described in interesting ways sometimes.
Yes, Steve, for those who want to learn another language, Duolingo has hundreds, actually, of languages that you can learn. It is a sort of gamified type app where it uses all sorts of psychology to get you to do a few little translations a day, teaching you language and vocabulary and so on. I've used it to try and learn Zulu and even a little bit of Arabic as well. And it's probably most well known by people who use it as being slightly passive-aggressive, actually. If you forget to do a lesson, sort of at about this time at night, it starts to chirp you a little bit and tell you just, you know, how bad it would be if you lost your streak of days in training and things like that. And, you know, I think you either like it or don't like it, but it is a fun way, maybe not the best way, but certainly a fun way to just learn a new language. But here's the thing, Stephen, people might not realize this. It was listed on the NASDAQ in 2021. It has a $15 billion, that's billion with a B, dollar valuation for an app that teaches you a language for sort of 5 minutes a day. I mean, that's quite an insane stock price.
Yeah, and it's also not, to use the phrase, not a huge moat around it. Someone could copy that in a heartbeat. I mean, not me, but someone who knows what they're doing.
Well, exactly. There are lots of competitors, but Duolingo kind of got into the market I think it was launched in 2011. So again, not an old company, but they just seem to get it right. And just get the tone right, and they've got internal competitions that get everybody going. But I thought it would be an interesting case study of what's happened to them in the last about 9 months or so. If anybody wants to quickly check out the Duolingo stock ticker, it looks like a roller coaster for the last little while. And it's a little microcosm of what's happening more generally in any sector that is impacted by technology or technology trends, or especially generative AI. Because about 8 or 9 months ago, Duolingo announced that they were going to replace quite a lot of the people who work for them. Obviously, you've got to have people who are coming up with these little language models and these little daily tests that you do. And they were going to replace all of those people with generative AI. And there was immediately a massive backlash. And it was just before they'd even done it, just after they announced it, literally thousands of people went onto social media and announced, that's it. Exactly your point, Stephen. There are other competitors around. I don't have to be with Duolingo. I'm out of here if you are going to act that way to your people. It then turned out that those people were correct. AI is actually pretty bad at doing translation. I mean, it's quite good, but when you're learning a language, it's not the same as just being able to do a rough translation. A language has got lots of nuance and idioms. You know, people know this. If I tell you that somebody kicked the bucket, you'd understand what I was saying. You know, my favorite one that I can still remember from school in Afrikaans, you know, om die bobbejaan agter die berg te gaan haal, you know, which translated into English is to make a mountain out of a molehill. Anyway, we can have fun with this the whole evening, I suppose. But, you know, AI isn't good enough yet to be able to handle that. And that started to play itself out. So Duolingo turned around and said, okay, we changed our mind. We're going to do it with humans again. The stock rebounded nicely. And then just last week, the new versions of a few generative AI platforms came out. So GPT-5, a new version of Grok, a new version of Claude. And they had increased dramatically the way in which they do translations and how good those translations are. So the market then crashes Duolingo's stock again. I think it's because people have got their eye on Duolingo now. So it's now a very sensitive stock. And then probably the killer thing that happened last week is it was leaked that Apple are most likely going to have real-time translation in the next version of their AirPods, the little in-ear headphones. And it's going to be all integrated. I mean, imagine that you can literally, I mean, this is, if you're a science fiction fan like I am, this is the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, pop it in your ear and choose which language you want to listen in. And again, Duolingo's stock crashed again. So, I mean, imagine being in Duolingo leadership right now, just trying to manage shareholder expectations and what's happening in the market. As I say, I'm pretty sure that any company involved in the technology world at the moment must just be strapped in tight to the roller coaster of change at the moment. And I just thought that Duolingo would be a great case study on that. It's fascinating.
I mean, this is one of the sort of issues of our time. So many people will talk about how, I mean, we've had investor after investor sitting in front of me telling me how much money we all need to put into AI. The NASDAQ, as it happens, is down 1%, precisely because your timing is immaculate as always, Graham, of this issue that people are actually worried about the valuations. The problem was that it was given such a high valuation in the first place when it was obvious that, I mean, it's obvious now, but when it's obvious that people could sort of copy the model.
Exactly. And I think people who've heard me speak before maybe get slightly confused because I'm an absolute tech optimist. I love technology, been involved in it most of my career, and I would not tell anybody to step away from technology. I'm not a Luddite at all. But on the other hand, I am nervous of the hype at the moment. Generative AI can't do everything that the Sam Altmans and the Satya Nadellas of the world are claiming that it can. They're making huge claims because they've got these massive valuations they've got to prop up, and they are in continual funding rounds. And the amount of money they're looking for every 6 months is insane at the moment. So it really, really does feel like we're in a bubble. And I suppose the lesson that we should take away is if you're doing something that is truly valuable, that is adding real value to people, that is doing something that has a touch of humanity, can we call it that, attached to it, like even playing games to learn a new language, but there's this touch of humanity. It doesn't feel like you're stuck in some computer system. There was this fun involved. Then you're probably fine. But if you succumb to some of the technology hype and just hand over your soul to the machine, I think the market might find you out in the next little while, and Duolingo might not be the only stock that starts to fall off the edge of a cliff in the next few weeks and months.
Graham Codrington, thank you so much. Futurist and partner at Tomorrow Today.
The Money Show.
Consumer Ninja.
Your Consumer Ninja, of course, is Wendy Nola. In a story this week, Wendy, good evening, about what seems to be a misleading SMS from ABSA. Thousands of customers thought they were going to get 500 Rand. What happened?
Yes, hi, Stephen. So it dates back to March, this episode, and the bank sent out, obviously, to thousands and thousands of their customers an SMS saying that if they avoided making EFTs with their credit cards, they would get a 500 Rand grocery voucher from Pick and Pay. The exact wording was, avoid EFTs from your credit card for 1 month from the 27th of March to the 27th of April, and as a reward, we will give you a 500 Rand voucher to use at any Pick and Pay stores, and then T's and C's apply. Okay, so my complainant, Samantha Glaister, followed the instructions, avoided making EFTs with a card for a month, and then waited for her voucher and waited, and months later, no voucher. So she contacted ABSA's call center, and that's when she learned that the voucher wasn't guaranteed to everyone. Only 10,000 customers were selected in a particular way, as per the terms and conditions. And there was no link to the terms and conditions, by the way. So is this a good time to hear from Samantha directly?
Yeah, here we go.
The SMS that I received from ABSA sounded like a guaranteed 500 Rand pick and pay voucher. I followed the instructions exactly and I waited, and a couple of months later there was still no voucher. So I decided to give the call center a call, and I spoke to a consultant. She seemed to know what I was talking about, so I'm sure I wasn't the first person she spoke to. But she said that it wasn't guaranteed and only 10,000 people received the voucher. When asked how they were selected, she said it was in a raffle. Nowhere, like I told her, nowhere in the SMS did it mention a raffle or how many people would be selected. And she said it was in the T's and C's. And then asked me, if she can help me with anything else. So I kind of felt dismissed. And I decided to look into it. And when I looked into the T's and C's, there was no link. And as someone in marketing, I recognized how misleading their wording was, and I knew other customers would have felt the same way I did. I went further and I questioned it.
It's so interesting, Wendy, because there's no link to the T's and C's, and there's no suggestion of a raffle.
Exactly, and it wouldn't. I mean, yes, there's a limited number of words you can use in an SMS, but as I said in my media query when I took this up with ABSA, was you could have said put yourself in the running to win. At least give some indication that this was a limited offer. Not everybody who complied was going to get it. I think that, and not to do that wasn't fair to the client and misleading. So. ABSA's response was that they had resolved. I said, do you agree it's misleading? And Chippy Alexander, who's interim managing executive for unsecured lending at the bank, he said that the SMS could be seen as ambiguous. So the bank resolved Samantha's case by giving her a 500 Rand pick and pay voucher as a so-called goodwill gesture. And when I asked the natural question, which was, what about others who felt similarly misled and let down by that SMS campaign? Would they get the same goodwill gesture? And I got a sort of yes, maybe, except it wasn't put like that. It was corporate speak, of course, and it went like this. Any similar queries will be assessed and addressed. So it's a maybe. So unfortunate, I think, is the word here.
Why was ABSA pushing customers away from electronic fund transfers from your credit card in the first place?
Yeah, I asked about that. I said, was it something to do with fraud? And the answer is no. The campaign was aimed to encourage credit card habits that maximize ABSA rewards benefits, apparently. EFTs don't earn rewards, and customers pay interest from day one, unlike swiping, tapping, or shopping online, which gives you that normally 58 days interest-free if you pay off promptly. So they were trying to encourage better habits for their customers, apparently. So a bit sad that there was, not full enough disclosure in that SMS.
We hear the phrase T's and C's all the time. I get them on every second SMS I get. How important is it to, actually manage those T's and C's? Can you just say T's and C's apply and then do anything?
No, not when you are expecting your customers or the general public, the promotional thing, to... If there's a major part of the offer that is hidden in the T's and C's, that's not okay. So, and especially when you don't have a link, Stephen, to at least say in the T's and C's, click here. If they do that and there isn't a link, I'm afraid you can't draw any other conclusion than they don't really want people to find those T's and C's. So the Advertising Regulatory Board, the ARB, has ruled on cases like this in the past. I found it 2023 ruling against Dis-Chem, where the ARB said that they couldn't hide critical terms and conditions to fix a misleading ad. So if a term changes the offer, such as this one, a raffle draw, it's a raffle draw, not a guaranteed reward if you comply. It must be in the ad itself. And I had a chat to ARB CEO Gail Schimmel last week, who said that even providing a link to the T's and C's wasn't always enough for the ad not to be, or the offer not to be misleading. They need to be easy to find and to understand.
Okay, so if you come away from one of these things and you feel you've been hard done by, you haven't been treated fairly, I mean, what do you do?
Well, I mean, in this case, do what Samantha did. You push back, you challenge it with the company involved. If they're not really interested, then take it up with someone like myself, or you could go to the Advertising Regulatory Board and let them, those experts, decide if the SMS was misleading or not. But I think the takeaway is for companies that if, you know, if there's something you need to say, if there's a really material term that is attached to an offer, find a way of putting it in the ad. And at least, you know, as I say, if you said put yourself in the running or you could win, anything like that that suggests to the person this is not 100% guaranteed thing. Not everybody is going to get this nice thing. That would be fairer. But the way this was done was certainly an example of misleading wording.
Wendy Nola, thank you very much indeed. Your consumer ninja, I mean, so often that phrase T's and C's apply. It really is just worth exploring a little bit further, just so that you know what you're actually getting into. Because so often, actually, there really is a big issue around all of that. Just gone 7:30 on The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Well, one of the great things you get to do as a journalist as you become more mature with life is you get to watch people as they move from role to role and progress and start to do different things. And I first came across Frans Beleni when he was the General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers. And to get to that position, he would have had to do some extraordinary things. Since then, he's moved on and he is now... Well, he now does some different things. He's the chair at the Government Employee Pension Fund, also on the board of the Southern African Development Corporation. But he's managed and he's agreed to take some time to speak to you as our shapeshifter tonight. Frans Beleni, it's been a little while. Good evening and thank you so much for agreeing to spend some time with us.
Good evening, Steve Ovo. I was so used in your previous life in the mornings. Good to connect with you and the listeners of 702.
Oh, well, thank you for taking the time. I made the point that I first remember speaking to you quite often back when you were at the NUM. You were General Secretary then. To get there, though, you would have had to be a miner before that. How old were you when you first went underground in the mines?
Stephen, firstly, it was by accident. I ended up working in the mines. Because my schooling was disrupted by the energy of 1976. And therefore, I was advised by my close comrade to say the safer place might be in Welkom where there's a mine. And because I've lost my academic performance bursary, so I was 19. When I ended up in a gold mine called Welkom mine. The requirement then was that you must weigh at least 50 kg. And therefore, elderly people advised me to eat a loaf of bread and milk and not go to the toilet before I take up the scale.
Were there other people from your community who were doing that? I mean, I realize that for many people for a long time, mining was sort of the only thing there was, you know, if you weren't working on a farm perhaps or in some other way. But were there people from your community there? I mean, I've always felt going underground must be quite a scary thing the first time.
Look, coming from the township, there were very few people working the mines. Mainly people in my town used to work in railway, we used to call it railway then, now Transnet, telecommunication, and various other power, which was public works, and around the farms, which were around the town. Hardly miners, really. I was not even aware that there were any of my homeboys or girls working in the mines, except for Jacosfontein, which was close by, which had a diamond mine.
Where were you growing up? What kind of community were you growing up in?
I grew up in a small town in the Free State. My parents originally coming from Stegspruit. They moved along into the Free State. That's where I grew up. It's dominantly a Sotho-speaking area with very strong Afrikaans because it's surrounded by farmers. That's where I started my schooling. And I had to learn those in Sotho, not Xhosa. And then later on at high school, I moved to the Eastern Cape.
Okay, so now you're in the mines, you're in Velcom. The union movement, and at the time, so the NUM, as I understand the history, you'll know it far better than I, is kind of 1984-ish, early 1980s. I think there was a big mining strike. Was it 1984? Was it a little later than that? I presume you would have been part of that. 87, that's right. You would have been a part of that, and that would have been a very exciting and maybe a very scary time as well.
Yes, coming with the energy of a student was fighting for some form of rights and getting into mines, and black workers had no union, only white craft workers. And therefore it was a burning thing that we don't have a union. When a call was made to say, hey, there is a gentleman, a lawyer by training, who has started a union and in Carltonville, Western Deep Levels, and we started joining, recruiting. The union was formed. I was one of those founder members in 1982. In no time, we ended up being the fastest growing union in the continent. Because in one mine, you would have easily 60,000 people. In my shaft, we were over 20,000. And we're staying in a hostel. It was easy to recruit and easy to convene meetings. And we started to mobilize on issues affecting workers, food, accommodation, working hours, all those. Safety was one of the key issues, which was a recruitment tool for the union.
What happened to that young lawyer, Frans? Where did he end up?
And he came to address us. Initially, some people were suspicious to say, this young man who has never been working in a mine, who have been robbed by people who are selling insurance before, but we were convinced by those who have interacted with him, such as Dr. James Mutlati, who was a mine worker, Director Matlala, and few others. And we bought into the idea. And he was very, when we go to a meeting with him at the Chamber of Mines, he was such a fighter, Stephen, and would take notes, some of the bombastic word, so then we can quickly go back and fight our employers using some of these terms, even if they were not fitting in your sentence.
And what happened to him? I mean, he started a union. His name was Jimmy Matlatsi. He had, if I remember, a father who was a police officer. Where did he end up? Can you remind us?
Just before reminding you, Stephen, I must tell you about the 1987 strike, which was 21-day strike. And 50,000 mine workers were dismissed, including myself. 11 were killed by mine security. I was later then reinstated. We did not get any additional increase, but we got for the first time a retirement fund, which is called Provident Fund. That Provident Fund now is over 60 or 70 billion rand.
Sure.
That miner, that general secretary, who was a lawyer by training, ended up being a secretary general of the ANC. We were very reluctant to release him because we thought the union will collapse, and were persuaded by Dr. Nelson Mandela, who came to us at head office and persuaded us that this way of presenting him, and Mandela was a good negotiator, and then we released him. The story, end up in business, and now he's the president of the country.
Exactly. Cyril Ramaphosa is the person you're talking about. You took a long time to get to the name. So I want to fast forward a little bit. And I remember the weekend. So you were the General Secretary of the NUM, at the National Union of Mine Workers. At the time, it was the second biggest union, I think, in the country, because NUMSA had overtaken you. There was a long period, and I remember going to press conference after press conference during the time that NUMSA was eventually expelled from COSATU. But after that, there was a general secretary. You were voted out as the general secretary of the NUM, and I'm sorry to ask this, but I just felt maybe it's the right moment. What do you think was happening in the NUM at the time? When you look back now, a long time ago, was it about personalities, or was it about the future direction of the union, or was it about something else happening in the union movement? Because there were a lot of deep things happening in the union movement that led to that moment. A difficult moment for you.
Yeah, certainly. And my wife bought me a book on that in 2015. He said "End of Power," and he said it has nothing to do with you. Read the book, and indeed it had nothing to do with me. My view is that what happened in the ANC then up to now started to get into the labor movement, where it is about individuals. It is about material condition rather than interest of those who are serving. Unfortunately, as we speak now, Stephen, there are hundreds of unions registered, which either splinter unions because people have lost power and then they form their own unions. There's fragmentation. We've got more federation. Then we started the labor movement. So it's unfortunate that it has become splinters and not that force which was highly respected by both the employers and government.
Yeah, one industry, one union. That idea has just completely disappeared. And the competition has
gone out of the window.
Yeah, and it's weakened the union movement. You can see it.
It has weakened the union movement because you'll find that in one a company or one industry, there are multiple unions, some in the same federation, and therefore it's divide and rule.
You've been doing other things after, I call it your union life, Frans. I don't know what you call it. How have you found it being outside of unions? And if I may say, sort of going from unions to a boardroom. I don't know if you had to change what you wear to the office every day, but have you found that quite a big adjustment? Was it a bit strange? You would have been on boards before in your previous position, but was it quite a sort of moment?
Fortunately, the union prepared us. One of the good things about people like Cyril Ramaphosa and Gwede Mantashe was to encourage us to study, upgrade our academic positions, and to learn. And therefore, I started to serve in a board while I was still in the union. I served in the Eskom Electricity Council then, and later on it became a board. I served at the University of Johannesburg as a council member for 15 years. And by the time I was on my own, I got a number of invitations to serve in the boards. And that leadership, that skills I've learned from the union, especially serving the interest of others, was actually very usable, user-friendly for me in various boards which I serve up to now.
Your shapeshifter this evening is Frans Beleni, done many things with his life, but currently the chair of the Government Employees Pension Fund. You're with The Money Show. It's 11 minutes to 8.
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by ABSA CIB, backing the Ideas Fund by advancing capital to African infrastructure investment managers.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Frans Beleni is the chair of the Government Employee Pension Fund, done many other things with his life as well. He's your shapeshifter this evening at 9 minutes to 8. Frans, you're chair of the GEPF. You've been on the board of the Development Bank of Southern Africa. How do you see your role now? You have a lot of life experience. You've been part of the transition in South Africa. Is it about providing, I suppose, some sort of guidance to these institutions? And I say that knowing, I'm afraid to mention, that there's a lot of controversy sometimes about the role of people on boards.
Look, Stephen, GPF is one of the largest pension fund in the continent. It's number one in the continent. An unaudited statement gives us over 2.7 trillion, but audited 2.3 trillion. And this is money of over 1.7 million active and pensioners. And therefore, anybody who provides service to those members must really think twice that I'm dealing with other people's money. It is their life saving over a period of time. And therefore, my role is to ensure that nothing goes wrong. The team, the colleagues, and the trustees will ensure that everybody does what is supposed to be done. And we're fortunate to have a very good team, both in terms of management and very active trustees. I've never seen trustees who read the pack. I've seen in other boards where a board member open a pack in a meeting. In this instance, these ones, they read, they question things, and I'm quite fortunate to serve with a collective of this nature.
When you're making a decision, what are you thinking of first? Are you thinking of the fund? Are you thinking maybe of government? Are you thinking of the workers who belong to the fund? I mean, I presume that's the main interest that you need to look after.
Firstly, you check who's the shareholder and what is the attitude of the shareholder. In other words, is there sort of a shareholder compact and you have space to run what you're supposed to be doing? Secondly, the peers, the people who are going to be working with. If I found that there are people who are questionable sort of profiles, I'll be very reluctant to serve in such a board, right? My image is the only thing I have. And thirdly, is to look at the history of the entity. Does it need penal beating? Does it need to grow? Does it need to be sustained and maintained? All those things, you take them into account.
So, I mean, for something as big as the pension fund, is it the people who own the money, the workers, that are uppermost, are the most important thing?
Of course, the owners of this money are very, very important. Remember, there are those who are active. There are those who are already getting benefits.
Yeah.
There are those who are widows and widowers getting some form of compensation, and the children of these pensioners. And therefore, they are very, very important. That's number one for us in everything we do. Stephen, if I can show you the overview of the benefits, I think it's one of the best pension fund. It is one of the few which survived as a defined benefit. Many have been converted into a defined contribution.
When you look at what happens in government, and you've been on this board, on other boards, and so many boards sort of go wrong. I'm not going to mention any specific examples, but why do you think so many government boards go wrong? And you know, there's a lingering suspicion, I think, among many people that there's a sort of political deployee problem on some boards. But why do so many boards go wrong? Let me ask you a general question, Rob.
I think the problem is that if there are no checks and balances in an institution, then things can easily go wrong. The company secretary must be very effective and be able to raise alarm if things go wrong. The internal auditors must be very sharp, right? And of course, you must have a management of integrity. If people appoint people who are pedestrian, who want to do wrong things, then the whole institution and those board members will suffer.
France, let's change gear for the last couple of moments. You've led a very long, had a very long career, a very active career. Do you get a chance to have any fun? I mean, what do you do for fun? And please don't tell me you go jogging.
It's my favorite. I enjoy relaxing by doing mountain hiking. Areas like Clarence is my favorite. Golden Gate, and various other parts. I relax more in nature. So yeah, and of course I like sport, like football. My team is suffering now, but I'm sure he's going to recover very soon. The mighty Amakosi, I think it will come right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of optimism among Amakosi fans. I don't know where this optimism comes from myself, but it's there. Going outdoors, what's the attraction? Is it just the the long physical exercise? You can walk all day. Is it being with people? Is it maybe, dare I say, the fact that your cell phone has no reception?
I think that mainly is to reflect. When you are in the wild there, Stephen, I tend to have a better reflection of things I'm supposed to have done, of things I could have done differently, or recharging my battery. And every time I come back from that trail, I have my notebook reflecting what is to be done, that and done. And I also like to do a retreat, sort of annually, where you starve yourself for about 6 days, eating, taking liquid and all those things. You come there a bit different. You think that we have boosted your system one way or another. So then you can service others as much as with all your energy.
France, we've got 30 seconds left. A lot's happening in the country at the moment. A lot of people are very worried. Are you worried?
I am optimistic because I take a view what is to be done. If we're all going to be complaining and say, I'm worried, and it ends there, that's not being helpful. Let's make a little contribution as much as we can where we are operating, and the difference will connect down the line.
France, thank you very much indeed for spending the time. Good to talk to you again. France Beleni is the chair of the Government Employee Pension Fund, done many, many other things. And France, thank you for your time on The Money Show as your shapeshifter this evening.
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by ABSA CIB, backing the Ideas Fund by advancing capital to African infrastructure investment managers.
Well, very interesting to reflect on France Beleni and some of the things that he said. I quite enjoyed the idea of actually just walking, not away from everything, but just getting away from it all. I know plenty of people actually, more and more, I think they're actually, maybe it's just a function of where I am in my life, that I keep bumping into people who say, oh no, I enjoy hiking, I enjoy going for long walks. Looking at the US right now, the Dow Jones is flat, the Nasdaq is down nearly a full percent, the S&P 500 down nearly 0.5%, and yeah, some commentary coming through from the States that in fact maybe the issue is concerns about AI valuations. The Nasdaq's been very expensive for a little while, and just maybe there's a little bit of a pullback on that. I'm sure will have a big impact. It might also be around interest rate expectations. Jerome Powell due to speak later in the week. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.